dating lightning round here. A lot to talk about. You know, we think about fintech, think about data. There's nothing more critical to financial payments, processing, so on, than data itself. I'm joined here with two very smart, good-looking and handsome
Absolutely.
Panelists from PayPal and Square. And our goal today is to have some fun, keep it lively. We're going to start by looking at the customer journey and how data impacts that. The sort of three pillars of user or customer, acquisition, engagement, and retention. And I think one of the themes we're going to try to tease out is sort of the implications of data itself, real data, but how does it relate to the real world? And we're also going to try to get into using data to develop products perhaps, and looking at some competitors. So to begin, our first idea is what channel and how do you use data when you start thinking about acquiring new customers? For either Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, data is really the key to customer acquisition, both from digital channels as well as from our more direct sales force, telesales, right? But having that clean data source to tease out who pure prospects are from your existing customer base is really critical, and knowing cross-sell opportunities, upsell opportunities. I mean, that's just essential. Comes all back to core data.
You mentioned sort of cleaning out data. I mean, that's one of the plumbing, so to speak.
Yeah, you can't forget the blocking and tackling. I mean,
right?
it's not the sexiest topic about data, but in fintech, if you can't get in financial services in general, I mean, if you can't get the core customer data right to really understand the set of relationships that you have across, in our case, both our merchant customers as well as our consumers, that's it's kind of a non-starter in terms of being able to treat them like they should be treated, that we know them through their data, through what we know about them.
Yeah. How about Square?
Yeah, I'll say very similar sort of thought process. I think step one for us is who's an existing customer and what do they look like?
And I'm sorry, when we think about that, is it a merchant or is it a consumer?
Yeah, so I think for us, most of our customers, you can think of them as merchants,
Yep.
SMB merchants. So step one usually is who's a good merchant, what do they look like, and then can we find like merchants, right? And then we use all the channels that you also mentioned, Adam, which can be like Facebook and Google and Twitter and other paid channels. But for us, email actually also is a very powerful channel. It's not a very sexy channel, as most of us know, but we get so much dividends just using email to target existing customers for upsell and cross-sell of other products.
And you say dividends, like what do you mean by that?
I think it is sort of a free channel. We don't have to pay money to any of the vendors. And two, we can collect a lot of data in terms of who's opening our emails, who's clicking, what part of the funnel have they gone through. So we just have more control over that channel than we have if we use some of the paid channels.
Yep. And so as head of growth, I mean, how are you interacting with other departments at Square around data? Do they want you to collect more? Do they want less? There's always tension there.
So I think Square is known for their risk competency. So we collect a lot of data to model risk. I think that was the backbone of Square. And before I came to Square, I always thought of a risk problem as very different than a marketing problem. I thought there's separate teams, separate data sets, separate algorithms. But the more I work with the risk team, I think they're fundamentally the same problem, right? So for example, if you think of a marketing problem of churn, what we do is we look at, let's say, revenue over time. And we say, is this revenue over time normal or not normal, right? So for example, if the revenue drops suddenly and we think it's not normal, we say, hey, this person is about to churn, do something about it. And guess what? On the risk side, they look at something very similar, right? They'll say revenue is going over time. If it spikes suddenly, maybe it's a fraud that's happening. So I think my sort of big aha moment was that both risk as well as marketing in this case are very similar problems, hence we should work together, both in terms of data pipelines, models, best practices. And that's what we are trying to do at Square across multiple sort of divisions.
Yeah, and so you're touching upon something that...
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on the risk front, I think some of the most advanced uses of data at PayPal are really on the risk side, and that is really to really protect our customers, the vast majority of good actors that are customers, both merchants and consumers, from those few that are bad actors, and really being aggressive and proactive about going out, crawling sites, and really finding out more about merchants that they're not necessarily overtly telling us. Are they really in the business that they're telling us? These sorts of things to make sure that we understand at what level of propensity in our propensity models do we start to get concerned about fraud. One of the things that excites me about the risk aspect of data is that it's one thing to use data for reports and dashboards, but I think to be truly data-driven really is having data impact the actual operational substance of your business. And with fraud, if you are allowing fraudulent transactions to flow through or blocking good transactions because they have some sort of false positive, either of those are bad outcomes both for the company as well as for our customers, even more importantly. So I'd say that those two guns to the head, both revenue and fraud loss, really make for a really enhanced risk data science practice that impacts the actual flows of the operations, right? The payment flows themselves, which is a different level than, say, some of the types of things you do for, analytics, reporting, dashboarding, that sort of thing.
Right. And you shared an anecdote about some of the, taking data that you noticed in your emails and taking that out into the real world as well.
Yeah, so I think, so one of the big problems we have is we have this funnel that we look at very carefully. And that funnel starts with who has come to our website, who has then signed up, who has activated, and then the magic moment of who has taken the first payment, right? And for us as Square, that is the moment, that we want all our merchants to go through very quickly, because that's when they say, oh my God, I can actually swipe a card and I can take payments, right? So our objective is to drive a lot of traffic to that point very quickly. And we have done a lot of things like, on email, like optimize subject lines and optimize creative and landing page so people open that. But one of the analysts, he was very curious and he said, we need to also optimize for time, right? And most of the folks in the industry have optimized by saying this day of the week is the best day to send emails, right? But it's a very blunt way of sort of sending your messages. So we looked at a bunch of data, couldn't really find any patterns. So we started shadowing a few merchants, right, to find out, when is the best time.
When you say shadowing, you're talking about sending someone out into the
just
world.
Went there and he sat at a coffee shop, spoke to a few merchants. And his intent was, is it a time of the day or day of the week when this merchant is free, that when I send my message, they can open it? It's at the top of the inbox. It's not very intuitive to sort of, find that. So after a bunch of shadowing, he said, look, these guys are very busy. If you run a coffee shop, you are making coffee all day long. But once in a while, every so often in a given week, they all have a day that is set aside for back office work. So that's when they do their payroll, that's when they open their emails, right? So that was the big aha sort of moment for us, saying, okay, look, if you can find that time, and we send an email on that day, it'll be the top of the inbox, and we'll open it, and they'll open it. It so happens that the day they opened their Square account is the same day, when they have it, marked away. So that was an amazing insight, drove a lot of lift. And for me, I think my sort of aha moment was that no amount of data could have told us that, It just came from someone being very curious, someone knowing our customers, shadowing them,
right,
and having this intuition about the system that you can, then back with data and cut it, and, you can A/B test it. But for me, I tell my teams and remind them that you have to be a bit curious, creative, and have this intuition along with data, and then only I think we can sort of solve such problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's smart use, and I think that onboarding experience for us is a big focus too, particularly really understanding the customer's original intent and trying to get them to that experience as quickly as possible. I mean, as a financial services provider that has multiple options for customers, we can sometimes confuse them or give them too many options up front, and they're kind of like, hey, well, I just searched, we really need to go back to the data they searched on, what were they trying to do originally, and keep that data throughout a really simple experience, and then open up more options after that.
And can you provide an example of sort of how a narrative thread, if you will, from that beginning onboarding through?
Yeah, so if they had searched on credit, for example, we offer credit, then we want to get them to that part first, and really take them just through credit and enable that, versus all of the other options that we have to link to your bank account or other sorts of things, right? So that was an insight that we've had with our customers, is we were giving them too much of a broad and, say, generic sort of onboarding experience, and not necessarily taking into consideration enough their intention from the start.
Yeah. And when you think about creating financial products, how does data play into that? I mean, obviously there could be sort of market testing, you can look at behavior. What do you think about it? And also I think overriding or underpinning all of this is, as a business, whether you're large or small, I mean, your financial data, it's the most critical thing you own, and safeguarding that and trust and risk all play into that. Yeah. So what does data tell you when you set out to develop a product?
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned information security. I mean, that is job number one. I mean, we really don't have a business unless we can protect our customers, both merchants, consumers, partners, whatever player that we have in our ecosystem, unless we can protect their data. So that is well known, and we take that very seriously. And that's job number one. That will trump almost any other type of development. From there, yes, experimentation, A/B testing, really using that to ramp certain products and making sure that we're getting some of the results. That's really important. And also for us, instrumenting our products in a way and making it very easy for developers from the get-go, auto logging, building things into services layers so they don't have to think about the data collection as they're developing products. That's our intent from a data practice internally, to make it very easy to instrument. Because a lot of time, anyone that's been around the block in data knows that, getting the right data from the get-go and getting it from an end-to-end perspective is an extreme challenge. So those are some of our focus areas.
Yeah, I think for me, when you can turn data into a product and make money through that, I think it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
And I think both PayPal and Square have a lot of such products. And we have one which I like, which is called Square Marketing. So imagine you're a small sort of merchant, right? You have all the customers coming to your store every day. You have no idea who's loyal, who's not loyal, who has churned, who has not churned. And that data, guess what we have? PayPal also has, right? And we could have easily given them a CSV file saying, look, here's all the transactions, like just go, and target the right audiences. And the thing I like is that, Square did something very smart, which is they made it very, very simple for a small merchant to consume. So in this case, what we do is we have auto-categorized their audiences into loyal and not loyal based on our definitions. We have made email templates that they can just click one button and send it out, right? And we have very simple reporting to say these are how many people who came back and how much money you spent, so they can figure out the ROI. So I think the key here is to sort of hide all the complexity of data, and especially for an audience that we serve, which is not very sophisticated. The key is how can you make it very simple and very intuitive for them to consume it and then take actions with it. And if they do that 3-4 times, then they get it, and then they can be sort of more advanced. But I think the trick is to be very simple, have a very simple product, which I think is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, from a data-enabled products perspective, you start with making sure that you're keeping what you know about the customer in mind with that product. So, hey, we have an app that you can use for payment on site at various locations. Just remember that I eat at the same place almost every day, right? It's the simple things, but that's just capturing that individual user's data and making those experiences extremely simple and straightforward. After that, then it goes to broadening out to the collection of data, right, across users and deriving value from a broader set of users and customers to be able to then say, hey, what else could inform my experience? And a lot of businesses, like you said, Waze, I mean, many other businesses are built on a collection of user data. So I think that's the next real, not just frontier, but expectation that experiences are going to have.
Where is it going? I mean, I'd be remiss if I don't, say that there's, at VentureBeat, we're tracking 1,000 companies in the fintech space, and there's been more than $106 billion invested. They're nipping at your heels. What's the frontier look like? Where's fintech going to go? How's data going to push that forward?
So I think at Square, we think of data as a core competency, both in terms of risk, because if we can't manage risk, we can't have any of our sort of payment products. But I think also as heading growth, I think data is my bread and butter. And my dream is to build the most automated and intelligent customer engagement sort of system. And guess what? That requires data, that requires machine learning models on top of that, that requires infrastructure systems to act on that. So I think pretty much data is, I think, at the base layer. And I think for Square broadly, I think we have so many products like Square Capital and marketing, and they all leverage the unique data sets that we have. So I think for us, it's all about, can we capture more data, and then can we turn that into some sort of product? Right. I think that is, and we have a lot of good examples, that I mentioned.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an extremely fascinating space in financial services just to see data science applied and to inform direction for your financial future, right? So the trend of robo-advisors and these sorts of things that are all, extremely data-driven and disrupting a lot of different types of traditional services. But I think at the heart of it, spending time at a big bank, Wells Fargo, and here, I think the reality is that still a lot of financial services companies are very product-centric in their focus and not necessarily holistically customer-centric. And it's as I've made the rounds and talked to customers, it's hard to find customers that say, yeah, my bank really gets me and really offers me exactly what I need next, right? Most of the time, they kind of poke you in the eye with an offer that kind of like, really? You didn't look at my data, right? You don't really know me that well. So I think the next frontier is really not just pulling it together, because a lot of organizations do have the data. It's really making it more organizationally feasible to maybe cannibalize some businesses on behalf of the customer to be able to then offer the right product and the right direction for their future to get beyond kind of a surface level engagement with them and really feel like your financial services provider knows you to the core. And I think that's where fintech comes in, because I think that tech side, the data side, can really drive that to a different level than it is today.
Well, I think we are out of time, and I don't want to keep anyone from lunch, but I really think that you guys both just hit upon it. I started out by saying we're going to see if there's some implications between data and the real data in the real world, and just heard about it, that there's fintech is going to come together in a more holistic, customer-centric way, and data is going to push it forward. So thank you both very much, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.